It took more than 20 years for the Philippines to resemble the importance of tarsier and Philippine eagles towards their populace. Currently, there's a popularity within the representation of this species that they make for the biodiversity of their nation, thanks to the effort of the clamor that we have created. Problem number one, they are being hunted even more due to the demand that they have for exotic markets because of their popularity. Problem number two, the state conservation is fiscally limited, as Gulf conceded, even this animal advocacy group. This is the reason why Joseph primarily pushed why NGO is the most critical actor to capitalize this tension, because there's a clamor for them to get more budget and get more donor funding from this. And I'm going to prove that later on why it won't going to happen in state obligation or in state capacity in itself. Because they have access to donor trust that the state doesn't have due to two reasons. One, Brett talked about why the state budget prioritization puts animal conservation at the bottom because there's lesser urgency on it for state fiscal strategization. Number two, because they're the easiest sector of the government to have corrupted officials, like the DNR for the Philippines, for example, because those sectors carries less scrutiny within the checks and balances of the state since less people care for them. So, in the comparative, if you follow Gov, donors are less likely to donate on their side because the general populace knows that it goes to the corrupt officials, which gained no response from them. Second, in their best case, if they do donate, it's not going to be placed in the maximum capacity, since again, it will be put on the corrupt officials. Less security spaces will be created, less state regulation for poachers will happen, despite all of the of possible fiscal allocation that they may have within this area. One important clarification here. Animal conservation group exists to protect and conserve endangered species. The material with WHIP or Gov WHIP push us that we're not protecting critical areas simply because, it's not that urgent, they say. But the problem is, it is urgent because they do have the proper scope and proper purpose of conserving endangered species. The problem with them is that I think they assume that this is about animal rights group, which are the largest group that brackets this movement, but that is a different semantic for debate. All of the harms of no protection simply exist in Gulf. This is why the Gulf case in the comparative remains alive. This is why the OP case in the comparative remains alive, since all of this gained no response from them. Even at the end of their whip, the fact that you're just wasting years of platforms that we have created in order for them to be lobbied in the public so that they become popular still stands. The trust bomb off is on the linear pathway that gets the benefit of Gulf. Since if we follow the impact that they want other species to get help, but our crucial response to this goes in twofold. First, the prioritization helps the biodiversity in general. The fact that you create practices in sphere of poaching practices to protect tarsier, for instance, helps other species. The material that the trees that you get or that you protect for Philippine eagle are the same trees that other birds rely on. This just proves how the benefit that we have will prosper and trickle down to the same species that government cares for. Second, the problem for Gov is that the clamor from Gov is that they say that animal advocacy group have strained budget. I'm sorry, but there's another two specific flip under the second general flip. First, just because you rally for other species of bird in Gulf means that you will have any solvency because the public doesn't care about it that much. I want to ask, where does NGOs get their budgets? And this is why my POI is important. Is it from the public? Really? It is from the public. So you do need to gain leverage and capitalization from the public. This is the only access for you to gain those resources in the first place. So gauge yourself in the level of success that Gov will have. Comparatively in our side, this is where we get the social support that we need to have as an NGO. People will donate to you because you centered on advocacy for the means that they care for. In their side, you need to have tons of new propaganda in order for them to work. Problem, there's no mechanism of assurance why it will work. This debate is centered on how impacts will be sustained from the group because you need to access how the impacts are reached, which still gain no response or no mech from them. Second, this is the largest flip. If you have a lot of attention due to your advocacy, you get donations from charities and other private actors. The way up here is simple. The exclusive map of having enough budget to sustain your group is only proven in our side. And how do you really solve the crisis of Gulf? We simply say, we use the budgets that you have garnered to also help other non-popular endangered species that you have garnered from this lobbying that you have strategized. Since the strat and op is on the verge of campaign, but that doesn't mean that our actions will be limited on the spotlight that we have pandered for. But sure, let's bite the worst case here. In our side, you need to put 70% of your budget to help hawksbill sea turtle, for example, you will still have 30% of that budget to protect and generate a lot of protection for other species of turtle. Since you have generated this from your campaign, that's why you advocate this strategically for the spotlight and for the generation of budget. On their side, you're simply left with nothing at all, since even if you get budgets from small amount of people, that small budget pool also garners small actions for this endangered species. But for that, I'll take the POI.
But the only way for you to advocate for highly acute animals is to allocate funds to helping these animals to get results. I don't see how you can use that funds to also help unpopular species and try to
You do get it, because you will get a lot of resources from the donations that you have from a lot of people, and you can trickle down because it's still on your control. How do you allocate these budgets? You just need to prioritize them in your campaign, and the wording itself is prioritize. This means that even if we prioritize tarsier over other monkey species, at least we give them a solution. No, animal conservation group exists in order for them to conserve endangered species. The metric of success here hinges on where do we get the assurance that we can serve something, which is still non-existent involved. Secondly, Joseph talked about high-end market for this endangered species. Gov said there's no urgency. Untrue, because you are not listening to our speeches. The popularity that they have garnered allows toxic spaces to hunt them for profit, because that attention doesn't always apply in good actors. The problem here is that the response from WIP say, it's illegal, that means it's bad, it's being prohibited right now in the status quo. Problem, I said there's lesser attention to these practices because lesser people cared for them, or because lesser people lobby for them. I think the attention that they get is not just applicable to good faith actors, it also applies to bad faith actors. It also applies to rich people that fills up this demand with their incentives to retain popular species in their home. So this means that it is only on our side where we get the clamor and advocacy to mitigate this as a group, because it's our job to fix the advocacy on how do we increase the reality of poaching that happens. How do we increase the reality that practices of keeping them as a pet is simply perverse. Note how this also connected the case of that, like the fact that we need to capitalize the moment in order for you to get the leverage that animal conservation practices of the state is going to happen, because more attention that you get means that the more lives and more shares that you have signals the importance of your existence for the state to lobby within their policies, because you represent the ideals of the citizen. This is why we position better strategized discussion between the state and this group, because you are more visible to them to the long term. Very proud to oppose.